Everybody, welcome to another edition of True Seekers. We have a Coach's Corner today. We're going to take some questions from the mailbag. Of course, please send in your video questions or your written questions to our email. You can find us at proadvisorcoach.com, anywhere where you watch your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, LinkedIn, Spotify. Am I missing anything, Coach?
All the places. Anchor. I don't know. There's more. There's lots. There's podcasts everywhere these days.
Wherever you consume your podcasts. Anyways, Coach, I figured if you jump right in, we got some mailbag questions. The first question today comes from Jennifer, who lives in Charlotte. She says, what's the best approach to managing changes outside my control? I thought this is a cool question because this applies to everybody. But maybe you can share some best practices for how you manage that.
What's the best approach for managing changes outside of your control? Yeah, it's a spectacular question and one that is relevant. My bet is for basically everyone. I worked with someone today who's trying to figure out what the next steps in his business, established business already, but what's my next steps? I've got this option here, I've got that option there. And when you're looking at options that are right in front of you, it's like, what next step do I take? And if you've been successful in any way, that like those options are probably legit, like whatever one you go to. And it's difficult to know what's the right one. But the surefire way of knowing what the right one is to define where you want to go. And so once you've defined where you want to go, and where you want to go might sound a bit arbitrary as well, but what that really means is in that particular context of your life, depending on which part of your life you're talking about, what's the medium or long-term area, or how does it affect your entirety of life? So where do you want to go in that particular place? And which option best fits the journey that you want to go on? So really the answer to what's the best approach to managing changes outside of your control is that you should be focused on where you want to go anyway. And then any changes come up will have much less impact on that in the first place. Because essentially, if you know that like, you're at start point A and you want to get to end point B, then you know where you could see B and you're at A, and you start to go along the journey. And when things pop up in that journey, like trees fall down or roads are closed or the rain's bad or just some way of not getting to that next step, you know that you're already going to B. So what you're doing is you just maneuver your way around B, around that obstacle, rather to get to B. So the changes that are out of your control, it's just a way of, okay, well, how do I get around this change? What do I really want? What adjustments do I need to make? Because you know what, like the challenges or the roadblocks are the journey themselves.
It's so true. And I'm actually going to build off of what you mentioned and use a martial arts reference, which is your environment that you're more used to. But I know maybe you know more about this than I do, but there's a martial arts or multiple versions of this where they use energy against the opponent. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
So when somebody goes to throw a punch, you sidestep them and use their energy against them, and you can attack after that. So I think of the same thing when things are outside of our control. There's an opportunity there somehow, some way. So I think the stress that we feel from experiencing things that are outside of our control, that are maybe at first perceived that don't serve us, always have an opportunity, some sort of silver lining hidden somewhere, somehow inside of it, that we have to seek out. Like, it's not obvious, but it's using the energy that's already there to build off of that and make it even more great, or get to the end result even more quickly than you had originally intended.
Yeah. Life happens for us if you want to see it. You know, what's wrong is always available, but so is what's right. The default tends to be what's wrong.
Well, it's so funny having that mantra, because you can repeat it so many times, and then once you're in it, that's the superpower, right? Is being able to recognize it, because it doesn't feel like you think it would feel when you have that mantra.
Well, and go back to martial arts or any sort of other training, right? You train so then when you're in the place where it's high stress, that the default, you've put enough repetitions is the mother of skill. so that when you do get in that position, when you actually have to use it, it's there for you.
Mm.
Because it's one thing knowing it, and there's another thing actually living it, and another thing like experiencing it in a place where that's unexpected. Right? And so that's why we do the reps that never stop. You're just building up, just protection for when you do have to use it. You hope it's there for you.
So let me ask that question, because the question is predicated on things that we can't control. How do we train for that? What's the training look like? What repetitions for what?
To get the outcome we want to get to, right? To take the meaning that we want to take. Because if anything,
yeah,
because if we're not intentional about the meaning we're giving to things, we will tend to give it a meaning that's not helpful for us.
mm.
So any opportunity is like, okay, well, what meaning do I want to give this? And even when you're looking back and kind of analyzing a little bit, what meaning did I give it? Because I gave it that meaning, I felt that way. Okay, so I didn't like feeling that way, so I'm going to give it a different meaning, so I feel a different way. And the more that you can practice that, the more you can see it. Hopefully the game is that when you're in the moment and there's some big thing, this big change happens in the environment outside of us we can't control, that we didn't expect, that you just have a little bit of space, that there's no reaction. It's an intentional next step.
Mm. So the practice is assigning meaning that will actually serve us. I think that's key. I think when I maybe first heard that, it didn't make as much sense to me as it does now, but I think the meaning that we automatically assign to things, and I use the word automatically intentionally, because our mind has run on programs, since it was programmed, and we weren't aware when it was programmed, but we see the world in the way that we do because of what we've been through, what's been deeply ingrained in us. So that's the growth opportunity, because it's different every time, but it's the practice of it that makes us efficient at it every single time.
Yep, absolutely. Cool.
So this is a good segue into question number 2 from the mailbag. This comes from Victoria in Charlotte. And this is a little bit more, it's along the same lines, but it's a bit more specific. So if I have an important client engagement upcoming, how can I manage the stress?
If I have an important client engagement upcoming, how can I manage the stress? Well, I guess my first thought is, why are you deciding to take stress from it? Is that helpful? You might say yes. Like if you think about what stress is nothing but a push on us in terms of our emotions. And when you can think about almost physical stress as well. Hey, let's keep with the theme, working out. Like you need to go and work out your muscles and put stress on them if you want them to get bigger.
Mm.
So that's intentional stress. You might not think about that as stress in the same way you might think about it emotionally, but it's the same. It's basically the same thing. You're putting something under stress to give it an opportunity to get stronger, to build the muscle, to practice. And so, like, yes, take some stress from those client meetings and know that that's a good thing, but use the level which that you want, that's helpful for you. Because like working out, if you worked out and like if you did deadlifts every day for a week, that would not be advantageous to your health and your strength and your muscle growth. That would push you down. That would be problematic. But if you did deadlifts once a week, you're going to probably grow from that if you're doing the deadlifts and you're eating well, because you're outside of the working out and growing from it. So think about that. Like your cool client engagement, how good is that? Like you get to push yourself. Right? That stress just means that you are pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone a little bit. So just know that that's a starting point. This is an opportunity you get to step up, and then just go to what type of outcome do you want? What's the outcome that you want from that meeting? And what do you need to do to prepare for that outcome? And then get excited.
Absolutely, bring the energy, right?
Yeah.
You ended where I was going to maybe begin my response with the preparation. Sometimes stress is just a feeling that we have for, not feeling ready, or if we're confident, right? If you think about a time when you were confident, there's just no doubt. There's no doubt. So if you have a client engagement where there's stress, maybe there's doubt somewhere or uncertainty. And the only way to overcome that is be as certain as possible about your approach and prepare. So, I'll admit there's been times in my past where I've prepared till the cows came home, and I still felt a little bit uncertain about the situation. But I think that makes you sharper. To your point, that's the indicator that there's something good that is about to happen. There's some sort of, this is the challenge for what I've been asking for, greater, greater money from the client, or wowing them at some point, trying to go above and beyond for them. That is what I can leverage the energy. That's the martial art. The punch being thrown at me is the anxiety or the stress, and turning it around on itself is, well, what's the biggest form of wow that I can deliver here, and how can I be as prepared as possible when I engage the client for it?
Absolutely. So what comes first, the certainty or the preparation?
I think so many of us want to see want to prepare to get to the certainty, but certainty is nothing more than a state of mind. And I think we can get to that and kind of reverse engineer it. If I'm certain, then what kind of preparation would I need to show up to deliver the best results?
Right. It's a funny one, right? Like, because you're like, oh, I need to prepare to be certain. But what part of that preparation do you decide to tell yourself I'm certain now? Because it's just let's just say I'm studying for an exam, and I could read, here's the textbook, you read it and you make notes. You read it and you make notes. At a certain point, you might decide, I'm certain I'm going to pass it now. You might also say that I need to read it as many times and take as many notes as I can. And that could put you in a place where you are up to taking the exam and you still feel like you're not prepared because you told yourself it's as many times as you can. So there's no winning parameter from that. Versus if you start and say, look, I'm going to read this thing 3 times. I'm going to make notes on it 3 times. And once I've done that, I'm going to consider myself prepared and certain. Go do that and you will feel that.
Mm.
And so it's setting the parameters. And the part in between is tough, bro, because it's like, okay, I felt certain now. Well, what was the thing that happened? Because somewhere subconsciously in your body, you told yourself you're certain. It was there somehow. You just didn't realize where it was.
Mm.
So if you can just define that, you'll get better at seeing it for yourself. And then ultimately is like, that in any given situation where it's uncomfortable, that is your opportunity to grow and learn. So you can always win in an uncomfortable situation. So regardless of the preparation, I always win. So you can just take the certainty from the uncertainty. Oh, good. I've got some uncertainty. It's uncomfortable. So I definitely know I'm going to grow. And when I grow, that means I win. I expand, I become more. So I can create more, be more, give back more. So all I've got to do is be uncertain and uncomfortable to do that. So I'm certain that makes me grow. So regardless of the preparation, I'm already good. Thanks.
Certainty comes from uncertainty. So thank you for the uncertainty. I actually am seeking it out in my life. I welcome it because I know good things are about to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm almost more uncertain when it's comfortable, because that's the danger zone, right? It's like as soon as it starts to feel comfortable, I get uncertain because it's like, oh, what's happening? What am I not doing? Where am I not checking in? Am I checking in? And so it's kind of the reverse.
Yeah, it's a whole new level of programming right there, actually. That's what comes across for me. But
that's a good point.
Yeah. Hey, Coach, we're going to leave it there. Appreciate it. Thank you for this engaging conversation. Another episode of Truth Seekers. We'll see you next week.